So without any further ado, I would like to be able to start our discussion. And the topic for today is the future of AI, that the future of AI is causal. 3 things that you should know now. So joining us on this webinar is Stuart Frost, the CEO of Geminos Software, and Al Nugent, who's the managing partner of Palladian Partners. So please join me in welcoming our first speaker. Stuart, take it away.
Thanks, Judith, and hello, everyone. I can see that we've got people from all over the world, which is always exciting. So thanks for joining us again. So I think it's pretty obvious now, especially given things like GPT and so on, that the promise of AI is very high, but quite challenging to realize in practice. And just pushing more data into algorithms, as clever as they might be, isn't really working. We certainly can't rely on the answers. I think IBM's putting numbers out there that 87% of AI solutions in industry are a failure, which is simply not good enough. So how do we address that? As I said, throwing more data at the problem just isn't really solving it. We're seeing too much bias. We can't explain what's going on, etc. So we really believe that Causal AI is the next big step. It really does help with all these issues of transparency, explainability, bias, etc. But I think one of the key things that we're seeing over and over again in customer projects is that we really are providing a common language. So the causal models can be used to express business problems and provide a template for the data scientists to then do more detailed work. And even going further, actually create a deployable solution based on causality so that we can monitor the business going forwards and help business managers to understand what's going wrong and what to do about it, or how to mitigate it. So really getting into root cause analysis, looking at outliers, that kind of thing. So we're seeing it as a really powerful technique and a big breakthrough. So obviously wonderful for a startup like us with one of the very few products in the market. So our product Causeway is a complete platform to do causal AI. We're very much focused on kind of industrial, supply chain, defense use cases, but we are seeing quite a bit of interest now in other areas. And we're very horizontal. So as you'll see from this example, it's healthcare. But really the point of this webinar is not to focus on healthcare itself. It's wonderful that Al's willing to share his experiences so far with us in that. But we think those lessons are applicable to every industry and every kind of use case. So the goal is to be quite general here as well and get across the main benefits of causal AI. And our goal really is to make all this more accessible and practical. So we think that's extremely important going forwards. It is a bit challenging. Some of the papers are very complex. We need to make it a bit easier. So what we've done with Causeway is really created a platform that incorporates all the key libraries. The main focus has been on PyWire with Microsoft and Amazon, but we're incorporating some of the others like the ones from Uber and McKinsey, etc. as we go. And we'll continue to add the very kind of best of the state of the art right across the life cycle. But one of the challenges, I think, is that those libraries in themselves are quite difficult to use. So what we've done is create an abstraction layer above them, really built it into the whole visual modeling aspect of it, so that we can use it as a common language with business users. And we think that, as I mentioned, that's so important. It's one of the biggest issues really in software development today. It's all very well writing Python and using libraries, but if we're not solving the right problem, we don't understand what the business needs, and they can't understand what we're producing for them, well, that ain't going to work. So we've got to solve that problem. And we do really believe that Causal AI is the big breakthrough that makes that possible. So, you know, the idea is that Causeway takes you through the whole process of the whole life cycle, iterates around on the models, looking at data, looking at the business problem, getting subject matter expertise captured. Data scientists can then take those models, refine them, further iterate, make sure that we really understand the problem, and make sure that we've got the data we need. Rather than just throwing more data at it, we need the right data. And then we can actually build algorithms and deploy that solution. And as I say, ultimately monitor the performance of the business and help business managers decide what they need to do in the event that something is going wrong. With that, I'll hand over to Al for a few slides. So over to you, Al.
Thank you, Stu, and thanks to all of you for taking the time to attend. We all thought it would be useful to just provide a little bit of insight into what we're doing. Our company is a solutions provider in the global healthcare space, mostly doing, I would say, more bespoke sorts of solutions. But we've come upon an incredible opportunity to really mine and organize data in the African continent. Those of you who are in the healthcare space may know that a lot of the healthcare data that exists today is biased, or at least more heavily weighted towards United States and Europe and some of the more developed parts of the world. So the Viola Ford Fletcher Foundation has contracted with us, and we are working closely with them to not only discover data in Africa, starting in particular with Ghana, but also to then take that data and begin to apply some advanced analytics and in terms of some of the population health issues that we're seeing in country. Causal seems to be one of the best opportunities that we have. As you can see from this graphic, it's probably not unexpected that a lot of the data is in paper form, and ironically, although it's in paper, there's a lot of good detail there. So, we're working closely with people on the ground in country to digitize all this information, bring it into our platform, and then make it available through a set of standard ontologies, so that people can not just build cohorts, but they can also look at doing these kinds of advanced analyses like we are doing, in fact, with Causeway. So the next slide, I think, talks a little bit about the precise bit of work that we've had done in collaboration with the Geminos team. Infant and maternal mortality is a huge problem in a lot of the underdeveloped parts of the world, as you probably know. But there was a study that was done in India, and we've looked at a lot of that information. We've looked at the process that they used, and we've decided to use that as a bit of a template or an exemplar for how we're taking the OBGYN, and female feminine healthcare information and analyzing it. So we're essentially just using Causeway as the tool that's going to tell us why these things happen. I mean, yes, we can make assumptions about it's related to sanitation, or it's related to nutrition, or it's related, but assumptions aren't going to get at the heart of the problem. We need to know why things happen the way they happened. And so with that, I guess I'll just turn it back over to Stu and the team, and they can talk a little bit more about the specific work that they did around this.
Yes, thanks, Al. Yeah, it's obviously a fascinating project with, I want to say, it's pretty meaningful as well, right? If we can really collectively change people's lives here and reduce what is a pretty significant problem. So the survey was done by the Sogo Foundation, and they actually did a full causal study. And they were really looking at whether the mother delivered in a hospital or at home, and see that as a key driver of infant and maternal mortality. But obviously there are a lot of factors that go into that. It's rural area, somewhat similar to Ghana, but we have to consider things like different cultural practices, access to checkups, clinics, etc. And I think one of the really exciting opportunities here is that if we can help Al to understand what is truly causing some of these challenges, there's an opportunity to actually put different things into the field, like mobile clinics and so on, and do more checkups. So we can actually be very proactive. We're not just stuck with the current status quo. But obviously, we've also got to think about the level of investment and the time that might take and what we can do in the meantime. So a causal study for this is, I think, incredibly powerful. And we're really excited about the opportunity to help it out here. So this was based on survey data. So they interviewed about 5,000 women who had recently given birth and checked out what they'd actually done and what influenced them. And you know, there are parallels between India and Ghana. Obviously, in some ways it's very rural, some of the same weather issues, etc., that might impact things. We can also see that infant mortality has fallen in both areas over the last few years. So it'd be really interesting to understand why that is, look at the historic data as well. But really focus on driving it down further in the future. And as I mentioned, the cultural differences are obviously very important to bring into this so that we can understand how certain practices might play out in very different cultural scenarios. And to Al's point as well, same approach can then be applied across different parts of Africa. And different countries and different regions have their own cultural aspects too. So learning about how to apply that is very important. So, you know, the kind of research questions that we're looking at are how can we increase hospital deliveries? How do we shift the distribution of outcome? What can we do about it? Why have they been changing over time? As I mentioned, looking at that historic data, very interesting, both from the point of view of trends, but also outliers. So look at the historic data, is the weather patterns that impact things. Should we be doing different things during monsoon season, etc.? You know, let's be adaptive to the local situation. You know, and that could be shown in periods of particularly high or low hospital deliveries. What caused them, and how do we reproduce those if it's a good thing? So, you know, it's obviously a fascinating study with multiple research questions. We started out by building the causal model, really just reproducing what Sergio did in that paper. We're happy to make the paper available. I think maybe Dan can put a link to that in the chat. And one of the interesting factors here is that they did the survey data and then they ran, at the time, a couple of years ago, the state-of-the-art causal discovery libraries, and kind of left it at that, which is an interesting thing from our perspective, because it led, I think, to a couple of things where, based on subject matter expertise and local knowledge, you would have to question the result there, like location importance, for example, according to this, doesn't really drive hospital deliveries. There was a strong association in the data, but the libraries didn't show as causal. I think that's really a result of the limitations of causal discovery libraries today. They're using machine learning to go through data and trying to discern causal relationships from that. And it's not perfect. And our view is that using those in isolation isn't all that good. You have to apply subject matter expertise. You have to understand the business problem. And using that in combination with the libraries is very powerful, and we can get some good results. We're also, as you might expect, like just about every other AI company on the planet and every other company on the planet, perhaps, experimenting with GPT to help people, analysts, to tease out causal relationships in this and using it as an additional causal discovery tool that might bring to bear, obviously, different aspects of subject matter expertise. But we do feel that that's still going to be very human in the loop. It's a tool that we will drive, we'll do prompt engineering to ask causal questions and help interpret the causal answers that GPT spits back. But there will still be the analyst in the loop. It's not, it's not the answer. And let's face it, those tools are what they are. It's going to be a long time before they just give us a causal model on any particular problem set. We still do have to have people involved. So what we did here was we, working with Al, started to change this around a bit and started to add some subject matter expertise. So this is kind of where we're at the moment in terms of really starting to refine the model. In parallel with this, we're starting to understand some of the different cultural issues and what happens with like antenatal visits before. How is that playing out in different regions of Ghana? Obviously, there's a massive difference between the urban areas and the rural areas in this respect, and really helping Al to understand going forwards what he might do in those more remote areas to change things. So it starts to get very powerful. Also then able to apply the causal libraries. So this is, where we're starting. I mean, we've been using causal libraries throughout to analyze these models, but now we can start to look at the causal strengths. So what we've done here is simplify it, is pick out a thread of that model. And so we can start to see, relatively speaking, education is obviously a very good driver of hospital deliveries. It also, to a certain extent, impacts the willingness to accept checkups and awareness of incentives and so on, right? So there's a really interesting thread through there. But clearly, changing the education system in Ghana is going to be a pretty long-term thing. So what can we do about that? Can we give targeted education rather than a more general education level? That might be something that could be quite interesting, and the foundation, Viola Fletcher Foundation, might be interested in helping with that if it's going to have a true causal impact. So, driving these real-world impactful decisions and understanding the difference between what we can do in the short term, what we can do in the long term, adds tremendous value. So this is where we think the real power of causal AI comes in, really helping the business to make these critical decisions and understand the difference in timing and where they should invest. And this goes obviously to any use case. If we can start to understand perhaps where our observed variables are, like road conditions, weather, etc. At the moment they're unobserved in these models. Should we invest in gathering data on that? Are they likely to have a big impact on the outcome? Well, let's at least think about that. We may not have the data to support it, or we might be able to just go out and get some public data to check that. Obviously, weather, we can certainly do that. Geography, etc., we can probably do that too. So let's start to bring those kinds of things in and help Al to drive better decisions going forwards. So it's not just about historic data. It's about what do we need going forwards to really solve these problems. And clearly, traditional AI is not going to give us that.
Yep.
Right? All we're doing is pushing in historic data and running an algorithm. We don't get the answer to any of those questions. Causal AI pushes it in the right direction, at least if we use it the right way. So one of the big things we're doing here is looking at the distributions of data, like hospital deliveries in this case, and what changes are going to move that distribution, what's going to move the mean in a positive way. So, is it more checkups? Is it more visits, more incentives? What is it? Better education? And what levers do we have then, both short-term and long-term, to pull on? And this is really where I think the rubber meets the road with causal AI, right? We're really starting to understand the root causes of things, how it gets driven, and how much we need to pull on each lever. And as I said, we're doing this in the modeling phase, so we can do it based on historic data, but also the next phase of causal AI will be very much on the deployment side. So you'll, in real time, be monitoring the processes as they're running, seeing if the distribution is shifting, see if there are different outliers, etc. What do we do about those? So we think that's where, ultimately all this needs to go. And again, not something that traditional AI is really going to help you with. Interesting set of outliers at a given point in time, or what cause those outliers? Are they good things? Are they bad things? How do we drive performance towards those outliers if they're good? How do we spot them in future, and what do we do about them if they're bad? So this is all built into the platform, leveraging the libraries. I think this is a great example of where we're abstracting the power of the libraries and making them much easier to use. So that is one of the key messages that we wanted to get across. You can start to make business decisions based on this without getting bogged down in lots of Python code, etc. There's literally no code to build these models. Obviously, you can dive into the libraries, don't get me wrong. Go straight into Jupyter notebooks, you can manipulate it, you can change the functions, etc. But you don't have to, you can do quite a lot just in the tool. So, what we've got to do in this project is still a lot of open questions, next steps, but are there unobserved variables like weather, etc.? Let's go further in really applying the insights from that survey to the Ghanaian situation. Let's think about the difference between urban and rural areas. Do we have similar data already? Do we need to do a similar survey in Ghana? Learning from what they did in India. So there's lots still to do. We're still fairly early in the project in reality, but also very exciting. And as I say, for a startup like Geminos to have a great customer like Al solving these kind of problems using Causal AI is it's fabulous from our point of view. So I'm very grateful for Al's help and support in all this, and being a great customer and sharing his story, frankly, with you guys too. That's always good too. With that was fairly quick, actually. So we've got plenty of time for questions.
Actually, I wanted to expand a little bit, if I could, Stuart, because I've been also tracking a little bit of the messaging and all that. And this particular study had certain parameters that that we followed, and what we discovered as we went through that was exactly what Stuart just described. That there's a whole bunch of other information that is absolutely critical that we need to gather and make available, so that we can make not just a decision about one or two possible outcomes. In this particular case, go into a hospital environment or don't go into a hospital environment, because there are issues around that as well, especially again, and even in the developed parts of the world, you can pick up MRSAs, and there's all sorts of interesting things that happen in hospital settings. The real question, I think, that the folks that we work with in country want answered is, what is the best set of conditions we can put forth to ensure that we reduce the mortality rate for both infants and for mothers? And and what information do we need to have? So yes, we need to understand the why about a lot of these things, but it's very clear to us that the very specific requirements, or the very specific realities, probably a better way to say it, of underdeveloped countries, is that we take for granted a lot of things in other parts of the world that just flat out don't exist there. That some of the numbers that we've seen are extraordinarily saddening. In fact, 12 pregnancies, 1 live birth, and it was actually stillborn or just died shortly after birth. And you see this over and over and over and over again. So the question about, is it a hospital setting that's going to make all the difference? Probably not, because there are other factors that must be put in place. And this is what the Ministry of Health at Ghana is very excited to do. We're calling this a population health system, because it is not just about the health, individual health care. It's about the factors that are important when you look across an entire cross section of people. Now in Ghana, we're talking about 30 to 3 million people in the country, and what we're discovering is that they don't all have the wherewithal to to focus on some of the prerequisites for being able to survive in childbirth, whether you're the infant or the mother. So, I think that while this study was, focused around a particular a set of choices, what we learned is that there's so much more that we could put into the study, or a study, a similar one, and potentially get to optimal outcome as opposed to just a choice.
I think that's a very interesting set of points, isn't it? That you're trying to kind of have that combination. It's not just about historic data. You've got this unique opportunity in some ways to shape it and to ask the right questions and to really think about it deeply. And the algorithms aren't going to do that for you. You have to apply subject matter expertise to it, and so it's a combination. It's an iterative process. So,
Yep. And the depth of the data as well. And one of the advantages that we have being partnered up with the foundation is access. And beginning very soon, we are also going to be doing swabs and full next generation sequencing on a pretty sizable part of the Ghanaian population. There was an interesting article that was written recently, published in Nature magazine, that talked about how critical the study of the African genome is for world population health. And I won't go into the details of that, but the net of it is that by not focusing on underserved areas, whether it's Africa or India or others, we're potentially missing out on some things that could be very, very important to overall global healthcare challenges. So this is, while it seems like it's a bit of a microcosm, there's just a tremendous amount of opportunity that exists there. And our job at Palladium in particular, partnering with folks like Geminos, is to make that data approachable and useful in a variety of different use cases, circumstances, etc. We don't want to be prescriptive. We want the opportunity to use technology so that the data helps us get to the right place, as opposed to, again, making assumptions and biasing or prejudicing the work.
Absolutely. So Judith, I understand we have a few questions in the queue. So
yes, we definitely do. So I'm gonna start with a question about GPT-4 that I think you brought up earlier. So the question from John is, GPT-4 seems to be doing really well in figuring out logic puzzles involving cause and effect. I remember somebody saying no causality in no causality in, no causality out, i.e. non-causal models cannot figure out cause and effect. Do you believe it is true, given that what we have seen recently with GPT-4? Who would like to take that?
I'll take a crack at it first.
Okay.
Obviously the GPT world is just moving so quickly, right? So what you felt to be true a couple of weeks ago is suddenly changed. We really feel like, obviously it doesn't understand cause and effect, it parrots cause and effect, right? What it does, it learns from all the cause effect changes in all the text it's ever read, and it reproduces those to some degree. So while it's not understanding it, we believe that doesn't mean that it's not useful. And we can't go down the path of waiting for it all to be perfect and obviously have a full cause effect understanding in it. That's why we think driving it directly from the tool and the models that people start to put together and asking questions about that causal structure, so doing very specific prompt engineering and then interpreting the answers and iterating through and combining that with subject matter expertise and combining that with more traditional, not that they're old, but the state-of-the-art kind of causal discovery tools from data, like the ones that are built into PyY, which is also a field that's moving very quickly as well. So we see our role really as helping people to leverage and get the best out of that combination of tools and techniques, subject matter expertise, GPT with specific prompt engineering, and data discovery, causal discovery tools from data. That's how we get to good causal models with the current state of the art. So that's where we're coming from on that. But yeah, I mean, you have to interpret the results from GPT basically in a nutshell, right? I don't think just expecting to come up with a causal model from scratch, even though you can kind of feed that in some ways using JSON, etc. these days. So that's changing too. It's a very fast moving area.
Yeah, and I think the issue is that with a causal model and with this approach, you're not just saying algorithms go figure out what to do, but it's really a collaboration between human knowledge experts and the system and tools like GPT-4. And we've got many more questions to get to, so I'm going to go to the next one from Manny. Here you do not have many nodes of the causal discovery will not be working with a large number of nodes. How would you address that if you have a Markov random field undirected edges?
Sorry, I'm not quite sure I understood the first part.
Yeah, he's got a second part that he put in there too. So what I'm asking.
Oh, I see. That's part of the same one. So sorry about that. So what I'm asking is, what if after causal discovery, you end up with undirected edges, how would you handle this? The expert knowledge is useful when you have a limited number of nodes.
Sure. So if I'm understanding the question correctly, so my understanding of actually the Sergo study is that issue of location actually was in effect an undirected edge, right? They showed a strong association, but the tools said they couldn't direct it basically. So, at that point, you simply have to apply some subject matter expertise and look into it deeper, right? This is where I think the key aspects of really iterating around and combining traditional discovery tools with things like GPT and with subject matter expertise. That's really where it comes in, right? And of course, you do, to your point, always have unobserved variables. There's always noise in the model. The question is that noise overwhelming to the point where the model is no longer useful? So, it's like models are never perfect, right? The question is whether they're useful. And
I think Manny followed that up by saying, according to Pearl, we always have unobserved variables.
Yeah, and of course we do, right?
And we do.
At least, right? We can't possibly create a perfect model of the world. So yeah. Yeah. Did that answer the question, Manny? I don't know if you want to, I'm looking at the thread and I want to make sure I'm answering it, but we can always come back to it if necessary.
And then let me move on to our next one. Have you found interesting confounders in your study? And I guess when we talk about the study, I assume we're talking about the work that Al is doing, or from the Indian study. I'm not sure which one Reza means there.
Yeah, so quite honestly, it's the team that's been working on the study, so I would have to defer to them on that. Maybe what we can do is get back to you in more detail, because otherwise I'm going to be making stuff up, and I don't want to do that on the fly.
So then I think somebody else asked, how are you dealing with co-founders and selection bias?
Yeah, I mean, look, It's the same issue as any model, right? What you're doing is applying. This is where I've got an initial model, I've populated it with data, I'm looking for backdoor paths, I'm looking for confounders. It's the normal process at this point of doing causal analysis and using the tools and the libraries that are all built into the platform to identify those situations. So there's no difference in the way Geminos does it than what you would read in the books and use from the libraries, because that's exactly what we've implemented.
So we've got another question. Somebody has asked, many thanks for the informative webinar. What are the limitations of causal machine learning?
So the way I'm interpreting that is about the the data discovery tools, the causal discovery tools from data, things like the ones that are built into PyY. And it is a field that's moving quite quickly. There's a lot of research coming out, a lot of university studies, etc. So we're tracking that constantly. I think fundamentally at the moment they're useful, but they're not perfect by any means, and I'm not sure they ever will be, because at the end of the day, what you're doing is looking at historic data, trying to discern patterns, and that's difficult, right? It's just not easy, and it's going to be a while before those tools in themselves are close to just giving you the answer. That may never happen, actually. So that's why we think this combination of subject matter expertise and tools like GPT are a better answer. It's not to say that those tools are useless, but as per the previous question, sometimes it will give you an edge and not tell you which direction it's in. It might get it, it might be positive, negative, might be just wrong on that. Sometimes it doesn't take a lot of subject matter expertise to be added in to say, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So let's look at it further. Let's maybe look at additional sources of data so we can really confirm whether this is the right relationship. But there's no, unfortunately today, out-of-the-box technology that does it for you. And I think that is somewhere.
So we have another question. Cause and effect is instantaneous in some cases, but long-term in other cases. How do you take the time dimension into consideration?
So again, this is a really interesting aspect of research in the causal community. And, I'm a systems engineer by background. So a lot of some very similar control systems, models look like causal models. So, and obviously do take time into account, right? I used to work on all kinds of real-time systems, etc. And they suffer from that problem too, right? Some things are very long-term, some things are short-term, some things are in the middle. How do you understand all that in control system terms? So we are kind of looking at that and tracking the research in those areas. I think when you're talking about a running system, the nature of how we view the kind of causal digital twin that's running alongside it's one thing. So there's one set of issues to do with timing in historic data. Then there's a somewhat related but different set of issues going forwards, right? We might have studied the distribution of something and how to mitigate something up front using historic data. But then going forwards, when you're helping people make decisions, kind of to the point of the education conversation we had with Al a little bit ago, you kind of have to understand when you're making that decision, is this a long-term mitigator or a short-term one? Or what am I doing here, right? And how much do I have to pull on each lever? And how much do I have to spend time-wise and money-wise to make a difference? So those kinds of things are very much top of mind for us as we're going forwards into this. So it's a very interesting area that, frankly, hasn't been fully answered yet.
So we've got a question about Al. This one is for you. Why did you select Geminos to partner with on this project?
Very simple answer. The tool itself it has the kind of abstraction and integration that we want. We're not guys that spend all of our time doing analytics, although if we go back far enough, I actually was part of the early AI community in the late 60s, early 70s. And so, with this, all of the interesting things that have happened around the popularity and other things about AI recently are certainly, it's great that it's finally happening. But still, there's, I love open source. There's just a ton of it out there. Quite frankly, I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be the tool vendor. So when we looked around for opportunities to work with companies that were focused specifically around causality, for us, Geminos perked up to the top. So it was a combination of things, but the capabilities, the willingness to partner, the sort of the breadth of the tool itself, ease of use to some extent, and a willingness to work together to make kind of requisite improvements as they go. I'm not in the tool business, and thankfully Geminos is.
Excellent. Thank you, Al. We've another question. Causal models are related topics that are emerging. For example, relation between nutrition, macro, micro, infant mortality. What tools are they that combine models? How are time series data incorporated in order to trace, for example, the impact of changing diets in some regions where diet is becoming more westernized, leading to cardiovascular diseases and diabetes? Complex question there.
Yes. So on the first one, the platform is able to help you divide models up into both horizontally and vertically, so you can build these models up kind of Lego-like and combine them. At the end of the day, one person's kind of cause is another person's effect, right? So the outcome of one model can feed directly into another, and we can set all that up in the platform. That's easy to do. There is also a kind of underlying knowledge model. We focus very much on the kind of the DAGs, the causal model here, but there's also a graph-based knowledge model where you can show the data and how it flows from one model to another and how it interacts on those variables, etc. So yeah, we're pretty strong on all that. So obviously, in any kind of large company scenario, we see situations where there's going to be multiple use cases. Like in Al's case, we're not just stopping at infant and maternal mortality. We're going to look at all kinds of other problems, and some of those, to your point, is going to be related. So we have to be able to build those up in that kind of modular Lego-like fashion. So that's absolutely part of it. Yeah.
And we can follow up more on that specific topic later. Want to take the next question of how central is Perl's causal language in developing causal solutions?
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely fundamental. And hi, Neil, by the way, it's been a while. It's fundamental at all levels. We feel the DAG, if that's part of Perl's causal language, if you like, the diagrams are a critical part of it. We think they're very powerful in terms of expressing a problem and helping business people and subject matter expertise, first of all, agree amongst themselves what the actual problem is, but also then to communicate that to data scientists and other people in the development chain. So absolutely fundamental at that level. And then, of course, the underpinning math, the do calculus, etc., is fundamental. It's pervasive in the platform, and the idea is to really leverage that all the way across the life cycle, from capturing the business problem, building the causal models, and to deploying them as a kind of causal digital twin, and also incorporating them where you want into your mainstream enterprise applications. It's fully open environment. It's all containerized. So when they're deployed, they're callable from other platforms as well. So that's part of the story. Yeah. So
excellent.
fundamentally very, very central to everything that we're doing.
Okay. So now we have another question. Do you include any form of model validation? And if you do so, how does that process, what does that process usually entail?
Yeah, so we've incorporated all the capabilities of the various libraries into the platform. So, as I mentioned, we're fundamentally using PyWide, but others coming in where necessary. So yeah, in terms of model validation, we do all the usual, deseparation and backdoor paths and front door paths and all that stuff. We also do causal strength analysis. You can build a full structural causal model, functional causal model, etc. So it's all populated into the tool. So yeah, right across the board, we leverage the current state of the art in those libraries and then incorporate them into our overall methodology. So it's not just kind of raw, it's for this style of problem, this is the best way to apply this, is how to think about it. That's where we're going with this. I think one of the interesting things that we're seeing is a fairly small set of use case patterns across industries. Root cause analysis, outlier analysis, how do I optimize this particular distribution? Those kinds of things are very common across multiple situations and multiple vertical markets. So we're really building those in as patterns of behavior and patterns of discovery throughout the platform. Early days in terms of doing that yet, but that's where we're going with it. So yeah, it's pervasive throughout.
So now we have another question. How do you deal with time varying co-founders and treatment confounders feedback?
Yeah, again, we would need to get back to you on that from one of the analysts who's dealing with that every day. I don't want to get too far over my skis on time varying confounders. Yeah.
And then I guess the next question is, have you looked at other explainable techniques such as SHAP, LIME? Are they correlational? They are correlational, I don't know, but does it give you any more info?
Yeah, so obviously SHAP is fairly widely used in traditional AI to help you explain. But the problem is it's still just going from the features that you fed it, right? And it's clumsy at best, let's say. It's certainly not really explaining what the algorithm's doing. It's just giving you the strengths of it. So it's useful to a point with traditional AI. Interestingly, some of the causal strength discovery tools that do root cause analysis are based on a form of Shapley analysis. It's called, I think it's called Do Shapley, and it's built into the PyWide library. It's one of the key additions, I believe, that Amazon made when they started partnering with Microsoft. So there is Shapley analysis under the hood built into the tools and the platform. It's just that it's being used in a very specific way and with a specific search space, i.e. the causal model that you've expressed in the DAG. So that's much more helpful because it's using those kind of Shapley techniques, but driving it through the causal model to help you understand the causal model better. So in that context, it's very helpful. Shapley analysis for me in traditional AI is kind of making the best of a fairly difficult and challenging situation and kind of trying to explain after the fact. I believe with causal AI, what we're doing is explaining it up front. And then by driving it that way, we're narrowing the search space so that all these other tools like Do Shapley and so on are then much more powerful and useful.
And we have, I believe, one more question, but we're definitely have a few minutes to take some more. So I think this is back to Neil. You asked, as a father and grandfather of kids, 6 grandkids, all home births, I see some prejudice in these studies. Hospitals are full of dangers to mothers and newborns.
Yeah, and actually, that's a great point. And of course, making the assumption that hospital deliveries are safer may not be correct, right?
Right.
There are going to be different circumstances. There are going to be different rankings of hospitals, going to be different practices in home births. And, that was in some ways a limitation of the study, right? That's as far as they went. And one of the things that we're going to be doing is going much further and assessing, and it's again to the point of one person's outcome is another person's, cause, right? So yes, we can drive hospital deliveries. Is that the right thing to do? Is it actually safer? Let's really understand that, right? And that might be very variable on different regions and different levels of education and quality of hospitals, right? Are we talking about a very local rural hospital which may not have the best hygiene practices? Or it may be an outstanding doctors and team that have amazing practices. There might be outliers in that. So how do we understand all that? And also there are cultural biases, obviously, towards home birth versus hospitals, etc. So absolutely, right. You've got to take that bias out, and we've got to think about these problems and not just take the data as read, because all that bias is in there already. So yeah, great point, Neil. Thanks for bringing that one out. It's a key part for me of using causal analysis to solve these kind of problems.
So I know that we are running out of time. So if you do have an additional question, please make sure to put it in the Q&A, and we do have some time to get to it. I also wanted to remind you that that if you want to have some questions answered offline, you can email Samantha, and she's at samantha.lakin, so SAMANTHA.LAKIN at Geminos.ai. And please feel free to go to our website, Geminos.ai, to learn more. You can see that there are some codes here if you want to get directly to the website, or if you would like to book a demo or a meeting, we would be pleased to work with you. And we really appreciate everybody's contributions that made this a really interesting and lively discussion. And it would be our pleasure to continue the dialogue with you. This is an exciting topic. We are very excited about the potential of causal AI to be truly transformative in the way organizations really do business in the future. So glad you could join us, and let's keep the dialogue going. So
just finally,
Stuart.
On the reading material,
Yes.
I strongly recommend The Effect by Nick Huntsman Klein. He's one of our advisors. It's a great introduction to causal AI in general. He's an economist, but he does explain it very well. And also the work from Scott Cunningham, The Mixtape, is very good. Both of them and Paul Huneman have great YouTube channels and Udemy courses and that kind of thing. So there's a lot of material online. We do point to quite a bit of that. So if you use that QR code on Learn More About Causality, the website will guide you to some of those materials. But there's just every day new books, new blog posts coming out. It's an extremely active field.
Yes, it's a very exciting time for causal AI, no question.
All right, thanks everyone, and
Thank you.
And as we said, we will be posting a replay of the webinar shortly.
okay. Thanks, Judith, and thanks Al for the
Thank you, Al.
Thank you. Cheers,
Thanks.
everyone.
Bye-bye.